David stood quietly in the kitchen, his hands submerged in warm, soapy water. The rice bubbled on the stove, the aroma filling the room, but his mind was far from the present moment. His thoughts drifted back to the time when life had been different. 3 years ago, he had been a proud man. His life had felt stable, secure. He had a well-paying job in the oil company, a beautiful home, and a family that was his anchor. But everything had shifted so suddenly, like a gust of wind toppling a house of cards. The company shut down without warning, and in those early days, David had told himself it was just a bump in the road. He had savings, he had experience. He would bounce back, but weeks turned to months, and the money had run out. Jobs didn't come. The silence at home grew louder each day. Nadine, his wife, had once been his partner, his equal, but now she treated him as though he were a burden. The soft smiles and affectionate gestures he once received had disappeared, replaced by cold indifference and even insults. "Why can't you bring in more money, David?" she would ask, her tone dripping with disdain as she looked at the meager amount he earned each day. His pride slowly withered away, suffocated by her harsh words, the heavy silence, and the pressure of an uncertain future. He took odd jobs, anything that paid, working long hours on construction sites, his once strong frame now bruised and battered. Yet, when he came home, expecting comfort, he was met with more coldness. Each night, he sat alone, his heart growing heavier with each passing day. It was one of those days when everything felt unbearable that he found himself standing in front of the crumbling mansion, the old building where he now worked. The job was simple enough. Tear down the walls, clear the rubble. But as he swung his sledgehammer against the wall, something fell off. His tired muscles ached with every blow, but the sound from the wall was different. He swung again, harder this time. The wall cracked open, revealing something hidden within. A black bag fell out. David froze for a moment, his heart racing. Slowly, almost cautiously, he reached in and pulled it out. His fingers trembled as he unzipped it. Inside were bundles of cash, wrapped tightly and covered in dust. Foreign currency, enough to change his life forever. David couldn't believe what he was seeing. His hands shook as he zipped the bag shut and slipped it into his backpack. He glanced around the construction site. No one had seen him. He was alone with a fortune that could change everything. The weight of the bag was a constant reminder of what lay ahead. He didn't rush. He couldn't. He knew better than to act impulsively. When he got home that afternoon, his body still covered in the grime of the construction site, he found Nadine sitting at the table, her eyes cold as ever, staring at something in front of her. David stopped in his tracks as he saw the divorce papers. She had signed them. Her voice, cold and emotionless, cut through the silence. "David, I can't do this anymore. You're a failure. I'm moving on. I want a divorce." The words hit him like a physical blow. His world, once steady and familiar, had crumbled in a single moment. His heart sank, and for a long time he couldn't speak. He simply looked at the papers. This was it. His marriage was over. With shaking hands, he picked up the pen and signed. There was nothing left to say. That night, David checked into a small hotel, the weight of everything heavy on his chest. Alone, with only the bag of money hidden in his backpack, he sat quietly in the room. His mind raced. This was his chance, his only chance. He wasn't the man he used to be, the man who had been a proud provider. But now, there was an opportunity in front of him. He could change everything. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Maria, the woman from the construction site, the one who had shown him kindness when he had none. "Are you okay, David? I know things are hard, but I believe in you." Her words hit him hard, right in the chest. She believed in him. After everything that had happened, someone still cared. And for the first time in months, David felt a flicker of hope. He opened the bag of money once more, his fingers brushing the stacks of bills. This was his chance. He wasn't going to waste it. He would rebuild his life, step by step, using the money to start fresh. No one knew about this money. No one could ever know. As he made his plans, his mind wandered back to Maria, the woman who had shown him kindness when he had nothing. She had given him food when he had been starving for both sustenance and hope. There was something about her, something that made him want to move forward, to be a better man, not just for himself, but for her too. Days turned into weeks, and David began to put his plan into motion. He quietly acquired the company he had once worked for, using the money from the bag to buy it back through a third party. He rebranded, restored it, and within months, he had transformed it into a thriving business again. David bought a mansion in one of the most exclusive areas of the city, a Rolls-Royce, and began acquiring properties across the country. But even as his wealth grew, he couldn't stop thinking about Maria. She was always there in the back of his mind. The kindness she had shown him. It meant more than words could express. And one evening, as he sat in his new office, overlooking the city skyline, he decided it was time. He would find her. He needed her to be a part of this life he was building. He couldn't keep going without her. David's convoy rolled through the city, his black SUVs drawing stares from everyone on the street. They stopped in front of Maria's small home, and as he stepped out of the car, he saw her sitting outside, peeling oranges. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled and walked toward her. "Your time of sorrow is over," he said softly, offering her his hand. Without hesitation, Maria stood up, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't known that David, the man she had seen struggle so much, could rise so high. David helped her into the car, and they drove to his mansion in Banana Island. Within an hour, Maria was transformed. She was no longer the woman peeling oranges on a small bench. She was now someone else, someone powerful, someone beautiful. In the coming weeks, their bond grew stronger. They shared stories, laughter, and dreams of the future. But there was something deeper between them, something David couldn't deny. It wasn't just gratitude. It was more than that. It was connection. But as David stood at the top of his success, there was still something unresolved. A call came from Nadine, his ex-wife. She was desperate. "I made a mistake, David," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to try again." David's heart pounded in his chest. But he wasn't the same man anymore. The David who would have begged for her forgiveness no longer existed. He had moved on. He dialed her number and calmly responded, "I forgive you, but we can't go back. I've moved on." And with that, David's past was sealed. He had no more ties to it. Only the future with Maria. The future he was ready to embrace. As David walked away from his past, his future with Maria loomed ahead. But something still lingered. The people who had wronged him were not done yet. Would they come back to challenge him? Or would David's newfound success remain unchallenged? David stood at the edge of his new empire, looking out over the sprawling city from his penthouse office. The skyline gleamed with the golden hues of a setting sun, but his mind wasn't on the view. His thoughts were on Maria, the woman who had come into his life when he least expected it, and who had stayed by his side as he built something new, something that had grown far beyond his wildest dreams. Her presence had become a constant, but so had the tension he felt whenever he thought about his past. His rise from laborer to businessman had been swift, but it had also been lonely. Yes, Maria was there, but the shadows of his old life, his old pain, still lingered in the background. The divorce, the loss of his family, the betrayal by Nadine, they were all part of him. Yet, as he sat there in his sleek new office, he realized that his past was no longer who he was. It wasn't what defined him now. What defined him now was his power, his ability to build from nothing, and the choices he had made to take control of his destiny. He had money, he had status, and most importantly, he had Maria. She was the one constant in his life, and with her, the future suddenly seemed limitless. But there was one thing he hadn't anticipated: the call from his past, the unwelcome return. It came late one evening, after a busy day of meetings. David was sitting at the large oak desk in his office, his mind already drifting toward Maria. He had planned to call her after he finished his work, but then the phone rang. It was an unknown number, and he almost let it go to voicemail. But something told him to answer. "David." It was Nadine's voice. The same cold, emotionless tone he had grown used to hearing during their final months together. David felt a tight knot in his stomach. He had been prepared for this. She would call. She would try to reconnect, to worm her way back into his life. But he had moved on. "What do you want, Nadine?" His voice was calm, controlled, betraying none of the anger that churned within him. "I want to see you," she said, her voice softer now. There was something in it, something that wasn't just desperation, but something else. Guilt, regret. David could feel his pulse quicken, but he didn't let it show. "There's nothing to discuss. We're done." "But, David," she stopped, as if taking a breath. "I need to see you. I made a mistake. Can we meet? Just for a minute?" He didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to meet her. He had nothing left to say. "Fine," he said, the words coming out more sharply than he intended. But only for a few minutes. No more. The encounter. The next day, David drove to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, the one where he had first met Maria years ago, before everything had fallen apart. Nadine was already sitting at a corner table, her eyes darting nervously as she glanced up at him. She hadn't changed much. The sleek power suits, the sharp look in her eyes. She was still the woman who had once been everything to him. But now, sitting across from her, David saw her for what she really was. The woman who had walked away when things got hard. The woman who had discarded him like a piece of trash. "You look well," Nadine said, trying to break the silence. David didn't respond. He hadn't come here for pleasantries. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice trembling now. "I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I was scared. I didn't know what I was doing." David sat back in his chair, studying her face. There was pain there, but also something else. Something he hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. "Why now?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Why come back after everything you've done?" "I didn't realize what I had until it was gone," she whispered. You were my life, David. I didn't appreciate you, and now I see it. I see everything I lost." David stared at her, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He should feel angry, resentful, but he didn't. What was the point of holding on to anger now? He had moved forward. His life had changed, and he had Maria beside him. That was the only thing that mattered now. "You're not the same woman I married," he said, his tone colder now. "And I'm not the same man." The decision. David left the cafe with no more words between him and Nadine. He didn't need them. She had made her choice years ago, and he had made his. The man who stood now was not the same man who had been so desperate for love, so desperate for validation. He had built something real, and no matter how much Nadine regretted what she had done, it was too late. As he sat in his car, heading back to his mansion, David's phone buzzed. It was a message from Maria. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all day. I miss you." David smiled, his heart warming at the simple message. Maria had become his anchor in this whirlwind of change. She wasn't like Nadine. She didn't see him as a failure. She saw him for who he truly was, a man who had risen from nothing. He typed back quickly, "I'm fine. Just needed some time to think." He paused before adding, "I'm heading home now. Can't wait to see you." The future unfolding. By the time David returned home, it was dark. The security team had already informed him that everything was secure and the mansion was quiet. He stepped inside, and there she was, Maria, waiting for him in the living room. She had always been a presence in his life now, a steady comfort. She looked up at him as he entered, her face lighting up with a smile. "David, you're home," she said softly, standing up to greet him. He crossed the room, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her gently. In that moment, everything felt right. His past, his struggles, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the woman in his arms, the woman who had been there when no one else was. As they embraced, David knew one thing. He had finally found his place in the world. And it wasn't with his past. It was with Maria, the woman who believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. But just as David began to settle into his new life, something unexpected lurked around the corner. What would Nadine's next move be? Would she challenge David's newfound success? Or would his past come rushing back in a way he could never anticipate? David's world had changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. His empire was growing. His relationships were evolving. And yet, as the days passed, there was a constant whisper in the back of his mind. His past. Nadine. He couldn't shake the feeling that, despite everything, there was unfinished business between them. As he worked tirelessly to expand his empire, his thoughts would occasionally drift to the woman who had once been his everything, his anchor, before she became the weight on his chest. Nadine had been the one who had supported him when he was rising through the ranks at the oil company. She had once believed in his potential, until his fall, when she had decided to abandon him. But now, with all his success, he couldn't forget the conversation they'd had. Her words still echoed in his ears. Was she truly sorry? Did she want to make things right? Or was it just her desperation to reclaim what she had lost? It didn't matter. His future lay with Maria, and she was the one he wanted to build his life with, the life he had dreamed of. But still, the nagging thought remained. Was it really over? The question haunted him, making his mind race. But as he stood at the top of his balcony, overlooking the city that he now owned a piece of, the answer became clear. The past was in the past. It was time to look forward. Time to focus on what mattered most. Maria. 2 days later, his decision was tested. Maria had gone out to handle some personal business, leaving David alone in the mansion. He spent the day reviewing company reports and discussing future investments with his trusted associates. As the evening wore on, he retired to his private office. Just before the sun set, a sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," David called. The door opened, and in walked a figure he hadn't expected to see. It was Nadine. She stood at the doorway, her eyes filled with the same cold intensity they had held when they first met. But there was something different now, something softer in the way she looked at him. Her once steely gaze was now filled with something that could only be described as regret. "You didn't think you'd be rid of me so easily, did you?" she asked quietly, almost as if she were trying to gauge his reaction. David felt a slight pang in his chest, but he quickly pushed it aside. He wasn't the man he used to be. He had moved on. "What do you want, Nadine?" His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness there, a hint of something raw. She hesitated for a moment, standing just inside the room, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her blouse. "I want to talk," she said softly, her voice now laced with vulnerability. David studied her for a moment. She seemed different, softer, but the pain of what she had done to him, to their family, still stung. He hadn't seen this version of her in years. The cold, detached woman who walked out on him was gone, replaced by someone who seemed almost human. "I don't know what you're hoping for, Nadine," David began, "but it's too late." Her face fell, and for a moment, David saw a flicker of the woman he had once loved, the woman who had supported him, who had stood by his side when things were good. But that was then. This was now. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes lowering in shame. "I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with everything. You were my everything, David, but I failed you." David's gaze softened for a moment, but he quickly hardened it again. He wasn't going to fall into the trap again. He had to stay strong. "You left me, Nadine," David said firmly. "When things got hard, you left. And now, I'm standing here with everything I've ever dreamed of. I have what I always wanted. And it's not you." Her eyes welled up with tears. She tried to blink them away, but they fell silently down her cheeks. "I was wrong," she said, voice cracking. "I know that now, and I know you've moved on, but I just want to say it. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." David looked at her for a long time. There was a part of him that still fell for her, that still held on to the love they once shared. But there was another part of him, a stronger part, that knew he couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. "Leave," David said, his voice steady. "I've moved on, and so should you." Nadine stood there for a moment longer, as if trying to find the words to say something, anything, that would change his mind. But the words never came. Instead, she simply nodded, wiped away her tears, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, David felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was over, for good. His thoughts immediately turned back to Maria, the woman who had stood by him when no one else did, the woman who believed in him when he had nothing, the woman who had helped him rebuild his life from the ground up. He couldn't wait to see her. But as David prepared to leave his office, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maria. "David, there's something you need to know. It's about your company." What was this new twist? Could his past truly be behind him, or was there something lurking in the shadows, waiting to tear it all apart? David sat in his luxurious study, staring at the message from Maria. The words felt like a sudden blow to his chest. "It's about your company." What did she mean? What could possibly be wrong now, after everything he had fought for? He quickly typed a response. "What happened? Are you okay?" The seconds felt like hours as he waited for her reply. His thoughts swirled, wondering what kind of trouble could arise now, at the pinnacle of his success. Finally, his phone buzzed again. Maria's message appeared. "There's someone inside your company, someone from the past. I don't want to scare you, but I need you to meet me. It's urgent." David's heart raced. He had known that his past could come back to haunt him. But now, as Maria's words sunk in, he realized just how much was at stake. This wasn't just about the company anymore. This was about everything he had built, everything he had risked, being torn apart by someone he had once trusted. David arrived at the sleek downtown office building where Maria worked. The city's skyline shimmered through the windows, but all he could focus on was a growing tension in his chest. He knew something was wrong. When Maria saw him, her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. She stood up immediately, moving to meet him at the door. "David," she said, her voice shaking, "I didn't know how to tell you this, but I think someone has been sabotaging everything you've built." David froze. "Who?" Maria hesitated, as though the answer could destroy him. Finally, she whispered, "Nadine. She's been involved in something illegal, using her connections to funnel money out of your company. She's been setting you up." David's mind spun. Nadine? The woman who had once shared his bed, his life? The woman he had once thought he would build a future with? His stomach turned. How could she have done this? How had he not seen it? David immediately ordered his security to track down Nadine's whereabouts. He wasn't going to let her get away with this. She had already taken everything once. Now, she was going to pay for what she had done. As he drove to the location where Nadine was believed to be hiding, the anger inside him grew. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. When they arrived at the rundown building, David's heart pounded. He stepped out of the car, Maria by his side. She had insisted on coming with him, though he could sense she was scared. Nadine was waiting for him inside, but she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man David recognized, one of his former business partners, a man he had trusted implicitly. David's blood ran cold. "Nadine," he called, his voice low and dangerous. "I should have known it was you." She didn't look surprised. Instead, she stood up, smoothing her blouse as she faced him. "David, I never wanted to hurt you, but you left me no choice." The words were as cold as her eyes. The man beside her, an attorney with connections, stepped forward. "This is a legal matter now," he said, his voice full of arrogance. "You're not in control anymore." David clenched his fists. "I'm in control of everything now, including this." The tension in the room was unbearable. David's mind raced with the possibilities, the consequences of his choices. Could he afford to let this betrayal slide? Could he forgive the woman who had left him, who had turned his life upside down? Maria stood beside him, her hand on his arm. "David," she said softly, "you don't have to do this. You've worked so hard to get here. Don't let her ruin you." David looked at Maria. She was the only thing that mattered now. She was the one who believed in him when no one else did. He turned back to Nadine, his gaze hardening. "I'm done with you, Nadine. You had your chance, and you blew it." Nadine's eyes flickered with something, anger, but also a hint of fear. But it was too late. She had betrayed him once too many times. "You're right, David," she said, her voice trembling. "But you'll never be able to erase me. I'll always be a part of your past." David nodded, a calmness washing over him. He was done with the past. He was done with everything she had tried to drag him into. "Goodbye, Nadine." With that, he turned and walked out, Maria by his side. The chapter of his life that had been filled with lies, betrayal, and pain was over. He was finally free. As David and Maria drove back to mansion, the weight of everything finally seemed to lift. The world ahead of him was uncertain, but it was his now. He had fought for it, struggled for it, and now he had it. David glanced at Maria, her face glowing with the soft light of the street lamps. She had been his anchor, his strength. Through it all, without her, he knew he wouldn't have made it. "You were right, Maria," he said softly, reaching over and taking her hand. "I couldn't have done this without you." Maria squeezed his hand, her smile tender and full of warmth. "And you didn't have to. I'm always here for you, David. I always will be." David smiled back, the future now wide open in front of him. But even as the city lights twinkled in the distance, a part of him knew this was just a beginning. What would tomorrow bring? Would the enemies of his past finally be left behind? Or was there more to come? The story wasn't over yet. As David and Maria pulled into the mansion, a shadowy figure stood at the gate, waiting. Was it someone from his past, someone who hadn't yet been defeated? Or someone new, threatening to tear down everything he had built?